But it's been PSU banks all the way that have led up in large part the market move. We've seen the likes of Bank of Baroda, Canara Bank, Bank of India, the entire lot really that has been quite resilient this year. Let's bring on board then Rajnish Kumar. He's the former chairman at SBI, joining in to discuss what are some of the tailwinds for the PSU banking space and whether or not this run-up is likely to continue. Thank you so much for taking time out and joining in. What is the outlook in
Thank
terms of
you.
the kind of sustained cyclical recovery that we've seen in a lot of these state-owned banks? Do you believe that there is potential for this to continue going further?
Yeah, it seems so because the main issue with the banks and their valuation was around the earnings, which were impacted because of the poor asset quality. And the 4 years, starting from 15 or rather 5-year period, was where all the banks they cleaned up their balance sheet and made adequate provisions. And the banking system in India and PSU banks included, uh, they performed very well, I would say, during the COVID period. Some help came from Reserve Bank of India because of certain dispensations were given for the retail sector in terms of restructuring and recognition of NPAs. But that past, the banks have been put behind them. And what we are now seeing is the re-rating of the sector. There are many things which, in any case, are in favor of the banking sector in India. The growth in the economy, the digitization of the economy, which is resulting into the productivity gains for the economy as a whole, the demographics, which are in favor of the country. So, on the whole, things look to be very positive for the banking sector and the public sector banks included there, which in any case were undervalued because of the reasons I mentioned to you.
Right. We have indeed seen, a cleanup and a dramatic improvement in the asset quality of a lot of these public sector banks, which perhaps was a niggling worry for the market as a whole. But that being said, even though we have seen the asset quality improve quite significantly, it still can't compare to what we've seen with some of the private sector banks. For instance, the NPA of HDFC Bank has never even crossed 0.5% in the past 5 years. Do you believe that we will see a further improvement in the asset quality?
Yes, it is a continuous process. And if you look at the numbers of the State Bank of India, they are almost in terms of net NPA are close to their private sector peers. And that's why its price to book value or its market cap, it has improved dramatically. So it's all about a function of like the market, how do they perceive their earning potential. On the asset quality management, there would still be some difference in the sense that many public sector banks still their gross NPA and net NPA number is high. So they will have to continue to that cleanup. But there has been a lot of change in the approach towards underwriting of the credit risk in the banks, including the public sector banks. And there was an ease agenda which was agreed by the banks under the aegis of IBA. That has also helped the public sector banks in moving the right strategic direction. And the public sector banks, their reach is still, it is very good in terms of the trust of the people in the public sector banks franchise. That remains intact despite all the problems these banks had. So there are many things which are in favor of public sector banks, but it's still about the asset quality and its management. The difference continues, and there are certain sectors of the economy which public sector banks support, and the private sector banks, they're able to keep away from those sectors. So we have to provide for that difference in the asset quality. But at the same time, and that's how, but the difference between the valuations, I think it is too huge, even after discounting for that. The public sector banks still will have some higher NPAs as compared to the private sector banks.
Just taking a leaf from that, Mr. Kumar, the fact that you do believe that the tailwinds are stronger right now for the PSU banking industry. I just wanted to understand, while a lot of it is working right now for PSU banks, be it the capex boom right now, be it, the infrastructure thrust coming in from the government for that matter, the fact that elections are approaching and this spending is only going to go up, and that's the anticipation from this time's budget itself. Can credit growth recovery remain intact for PSU banks? And do you think largely it's the infrastructure led capex which is going to drive growth in the very near term?
Yes, I think it is after a gap of again 4 or 5 years that the kind of credit growth which we are seeing for the banking sector as a whole. It's not about public sector banks alone, and the 15 to 17% growth. It's a good number, but it is again it is driven by the demand, and many industries their capacity utilization is now around 80% or above. So there is a scope for investment, and uh, what is holding on the investment is probably the global uncertainties or the geopolitical situation. And but the time is right for more investment in the economy, which is aided by now the stable policies, incentives being given by the government for manufacturing sector. We can step up investment in agriculture, services sector in many cases doing well. So if you look at any sector of the economy, there is a likelihood of the demand for the investment and consequently the bank funding. So this scenario overall looks very positive, but predicting the future is always a very hazardous task.
Sure is, which is why I wouldn't want to put the spotlight here, and it seems a little unfair to ask you, considering you were the former chairman of SBI. But what one is seeing, Mr. Kumar, is also that it's not just SBI. While it may have started the rally in the PSU banking stocks, and I'm purely talking about the stock market reaction right now, but one is also seeing bigger a move and a bigger value play in some of the smaller PSU banks as well. Do you think that this credit growth uptake is going to be beneficiary for the entire gamut? Or would you say, as always, the larger chunk will be with the biggest, that's SBI?
No, it is all about the base also. SBI, when it grows by 15% on a loan book of 30 lakh crore, so that means 4.5 lakh crore. When the total disbursement of credit, like it is like creating a mid-sized bank. So the numbers have also to be, when we analyze the numbers, so we have to keep in perspective the size of the bank. Growing a book by 25% on a base of 1 lakh crore and growing a book by 15% on a base of 30 lakh crore. So the difference is so stark. And even in the valuations, about your point that the other banks, their appreciation in the recent months have been higher. But the State Bank of India has its run much earlier. And there is still a huge gap in the market cap. SBI is about 5 lakh crore, but the next bank is still less than 1 lakh crore. I think if that by that logic, obviously, if the smaller banks, as compared to State Bank, if they perform, then the scope for appreciation, it seems, in their stock price may be higher because they were so much undervalued as compared to the State Bank. So recent months movement is not the right comparison. The comparison has to be over a period of 2 years at least.
Good morning, sir. This is Nayantara from New Delhi, also joining in on the conversation. Good to have you on the channel. When we look at this rising tide phenomenon, and we're talking about especially the mid-tier and the smaller PSU banks and how they're being lapped up by investors, can I ask you that when we talk about this pack, why is that investors don't have the same rationale about the threat from fintech. You had to deal with that when you were chairman. You were the one who laid the foundation blocks of YONO, and we've seen how successful that has been at SBI. We've seen what HDFC is doing, what ICICI is doing. You're now the chairman of Bharat Pay, which is now in the news for very different reasons. But why is it that fintech is not seen as a threat for these small banks?
They operate in a, like now, I chair the board of a fintech also, and I don't think it's about like they're competing with each other. They have their own strengths, and they have to play on their respective interests. It's not about fintech. It's not about fintech versus the bank. Banks enjoy. Uh, there is some disturbance.
Oh dear, perils of live television, all of it unfolding live for all of our viewers. Yes, we deal with all of this, but when it happens live during an interview, what can we do? That's Rajnish Kumar, who was joining us live. Unfortunately, now have him on a bad connection, and I